You're live.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique Johnson, and I am the Senior Director of the Center for Policing Equity. I'm here today to invite you all in conversation, and I have some questions for the community working groups that were from the community working groups, and I'm here to introduce everyone here to be able to talk about reimagining public safety in Ithaca and Tompkins County. So you all know who these folks are, but I want to give you a very quick introduction, and then they will take it away and we'll get started. I'll give you also the agenda so that you are sure to know that your questions will be addressed in this meeting. And if not, you will be able to find out where to get more information. So I would like to start with Mayor Myrick, and give us a wave. And do you want to give a few words before we before I go through to the next person?
Oh, just, I know we have a lot to get through and only an hour to do it. I just want to thank everybody who's signed on to this call and has participated over the last 6 months in this effort. We are, I know the process is what processes are. You know, going far means going slow and going together. And we will get into the answers, so I'm looking forward to that, but I just want to thank and appreciate everybody for being here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we want to give an introduction to Chief Nayor.
Yeah, I just want to also say thanks for everyone for taking out time from their day to be here. And I'm happy to be here as well. And hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions and help explain where we are in the process and where we're heading collectively. So again, just thanks very much for everyone's time. And I look forward to this next hour.
All right, County Administrator Molino.
Thank you, Dominic, and thank you all for joining us this evening. Appreciated everyone that's participated so far, and we look forward to getting your questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Sheriff Osborne.
Hi, everybody. Derek Osborne, Tompkins County Sheriff. I'm looking forward to jumping right in here, and thanks for tuning in. Thank you.
All right, so I have a running show here. So if you see me looking down, that's because I have the hard questions and I want to be able to make sure that we answer them all. So I just want you all to know that these questions were directly taken from the Community Voices Forum and what we've been asked by community members over the past month. So I will invite you all who've joined us on Zoom to use the raise hand feature and ask a question. We're gonna have limited time. So we recommend that you keep it very brief and high level and ask questions that haven't already been answered. You'll see them in the participants list. And once you get your name called, I will click allow talk on the back end, and then you'll be able to ask your question. All right, so here we go. We're getting into the deep questions here. The first question that I have for you all, and I would like to start with Mayor Myrick first, and then we'll go over to Sheriff Osborne, and then Chief Nayor, you can chime in, and then we'll wrap up with you, County Administrator Molino. So first question, why should residents trust government in this process, particularly people of color? The community has been asked to provide input on other projects and have really been disappointed in the results. What's different?
What's different? Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, and I've heard some version of this in the community voices forums and also the working groups, and frankly, just in a lot of one-on-one conversations I've had with members of the community, especially around, and folks like reform. We've been hearing about reform every couple of years. It seems like there's a reform movement, reform package. And for people of color, particularly Black people, they're wondering what's actually going to change this time? Why should we participate? Why should we give you our ideas? Why should we rehash our trauma this time? All I can tell you is what I think has changed. You know, I think there's evidence of this change. The very fact that there, you know, the 4 people who are on this call, the 4 people that are in this meeting, this has never happened before. The kind of intense community input that we've done over the last couple of months, it's never happened before. Why has it never happened before? And here I'm going to say just some very real talk, and it might hurt some people's feelings, and I hate to do that, but it's just some real talk. Fixing the problem in public safety and in policing and in the justice system means fixing racial discrimination in the justice system. There is a strong bias borne out by all the evidence and the data, but also a ton of particular instances of racism, anti-Black racism and discrimination against Black people. Millions of people incarcerated, the entire ways that our drug laws are written. And that has been the case really in America for as long as there's been in America. Previous reform efforts have stalled out because there's been a refusal to acknowledge or admit that. You know, people in power, in elected office and in non-elected office, could not even get to that point to say out loud, there's racism in the system. It's a big part of the system. There's racially discriminatory outcomes. And without acknowledging that, you can't get too far. You can't agree on any of the needed steps. This summer really changed that. I mean, the murder of George Floyd, the uprisings that followed, the pandemic, which had obviously discriminatory outcomes in terms of who contracted it, who died, who didn't get the protection that they needed. And now there are, you know, in my now 13-year commitment of public service, I have never seen such unanimity amongst elected officials and appointed officials that racism and anti-Black racism is a real problem in our system and one we're committed to solve. So I think that gives me confidence that this time is different, that this effort will be different, that reforms, reimagining, reinvention will be real and lasting, and that we won't just come up with a plan and put it on a shelf and forget about it. But, you know, that outcome depends on all of us. You know, there's no way to say, well, how do we know that this is actually going to work? The only way we know that this is going to work is if we work it. You know, if you want this to work, like I want this to work, if you want to see real changes, like I want to see real changes, the only way to do it is to continue sharing your best ideas and continue reaching out to decision makers in ways that are effective and persuasive, calling them up, writing them letters, asking for phone calls where you can talk and share your ideas and share, you know, your perspective. I think if we all continue to do that, we can make sure that this moment is different than previous ones.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Osborne.
Thanks, Dominique, and thanks, Mayor. That was a good segue into what I wanted to say. I guess when it comes to trust, you know, in this process, you know, I sense the frustration, but we got to look at the input that's already been provided and the fruit of our labor. And I think that hopefully will provide some trust in the idea that we're taking this very seriously. As you know, I'm the sheriff, I'm elected by you, I'm directly accountable to you. And I ran because I was frustrated too. I knew we could do better and I knew we needed to do better as a sheriff's office and a community. And things have elevated to the fact where that's never been more apparent than it is now. If you look back in time, you know, the county funded a study in 2017. We know it as a CGR study. And that solicited a lot of community input. And we used that input to build my campaign. And my campaign wasn't my campaign, it was your campaign. It came from you, calling on fiscal responsibility, improving diversity in our workforces, increasing community engagement, and creating a sheriff's office that we really all could be proud of and that would serve everyone in our community, not just a few. And because of you and that input that you provided, you know, we've done a lot of things already. Our cars, we've switched our cars away from the ghost decals. That was important to a lot of people. We've gotten rid of our military looking bulletproof vest to a more slimmed down, professional looking, non-intimidating piece of equipment. Every single one of our policies within 2 years has been completely revamped, and it's now for the first time accessible to everybody in the community. It's on our website, and we deplore you to please look at it and examine it. If there's questions about our policies or suggestions that could be made, there's an online form where you can make that suggestion, and we look forward to getting that. We have a new complaint procedure that's now on our website for the first time, and that's been translated into 11 different languages through the help of Cornell. But you know, we've really taken an internal look at our operations and focused on things that right now we can do in the sheriff's office to improve our community relations and create the sheriff's office you want to see. These are focused on our policies, our training. We've moved our policies towards fair and equitable policing, disassociation with the immigration enforcement, duty to intercede, interacting with transgender and non-conforming community members, use of force reporting with an emphasis on de-escalation. And our training has gone, even further, and we've removed the mindset of a more tactical type training and focused on things that are more community focused, like mental health first aid, conflict management, responding to emotional crisis, transgender mindfulness, and duty to intercede and de-escalation. So all this is a direct result of your input. And we recognize that even though we've done so much, there's always more work to do, and we got a long way to go. That's just 2 years of work. We understand that this is a process that's going to take a long time, and we hope that you can trust in it and continue to participate in this, because we really need your help. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to kick it over to Chief Nayor.
Yeah, so those are really good segue from the mayor and the sheriff. And, I've always known that in policing, the only way that we do our jobs successfully is with public approval. And we can have all of the powers vested in us and authorities, and it's all meaningless if the publics we serve don't trust us and don't support us. I mean, that's a 200-year-old philosophy from the Pelian principles, but it's something that I've learned early in my career that is invaluable. And I think this movement and these reforms, I think, is a great example of that. And I think what we're going to be able to do is learn how we can better be the police departments that the communities we serve want us to be. And again, that's to have the approval, and that approval connects with trust. When we look back to what occurred in May with the murder of Mr. George Floyd, we came out and it was condemned because in no way did that at all align with any level of police training. And as a chief who's dedicated myself to this profession, I didn't need to wait for any reports or further inquiries to come out after seeing that to know that it didn't align with training, it didn't align with human decency, and I understand the outrage. And I was outraged, we were outraged as a department, and clearly as a community, we're outraged. And we look forward to learning and hearing from everyone as to the things that they like about us, the things that we can do better, and the things that we can continue to improve on to build trust. One of the things I think that's going to be really good through all of this is we're going to learn things that maybe are better suited to others, and some things that we can spend more time on connecting and community engagement and helping to build bridges, because we need to do that. And again, it's such a basic principle, but such an important principle. And that simply stated is that we only can do our job when the publics we serve approve of us. And that's what our goals collectively are going to be to achieve. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, County Administrator, you're going to have to take it home for us.
All right, thank you, Dominique. Mayor, Sheriff, and Chief have all brought out great points, and I think the only thing I can add is that acknowledge that the trust is a foundation of government to work successfully and collaboratively with our community. If we don't have trust, the best laid out plans aren't going to work. The best objectives aren't going to follow through. And murder of George Floyd, the disparities that have come up from the pandemic, Black and brown people dying at higher rates. I think and that's caused a movement, but I think what's important to acknowledge is that this existed before COVID. It's not because of COVID. We have to acknowledge we've failed to address this beforehand. And to complement what our colleagues have said, you have elected and appointed officials here that have come together, acknowledged this, and are committed to working together with the community to bring substantial change. And the trust is going to be the cornerstone to that. And trust will take time to build. And I think that's what we're all here to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we're going to dive into the real tough questions now that you've sort of talked about everything that you needed to about getting buy-in and trust from this process. So I want to know about these working groups. explain the role of the working groups. Is membership in the working groups fixed? Because I've seen a lot in the chat that people are asking about these working groups. Most of the members are from the county, city, and CPE, my company. And there doesn't seem to be a lot from community organizations and nonprofit agencies. And so I want to hear from you all about this process. I need to learn more. And I think that the people do too. So I'm going to go in reverse order so that folks can be able to hear from everybody in a different way. So I'm starting with you, Chief Administrator.
Thanks, Dominic. Yes, the working groups have city, county, and CPE staff that have technical and specific backgrounds in some of this area. I'll say also, we do have a lot of community members as well as academic members that have brought great value and great depth to this process. We've published, and I know Dominic or Dom will put it in the chat. We published recently the deliverables of each group and who their membership is, so you can see that. The feedback is critical to these groups, and the community voice forums has been one opportunity that we've had. I think the mayor and I have introduced them, either 5 or 6 of them over the recent weeks. We've had a huge amount of feedback. I want to say over 1,000 folks have either been have attended those or watched them after the recordings, and that's incredibly important. We also have a significant amount of focus groups, well over a dozen different focus groups, reaching hard to reach populations in the community, working through additional community networks, different agencies to bring voices forward. They've probably gone through more than half of them. I know they have a big group more to come over the upcoming weeks. Again, taking all of that information, bringing it together collectively, showing trends, showing commonalities, is a piece of this puzzle. The other part of it is also taking the information, the data, the records management that we have through our dispatch systems, through our records or our law enforcement records management systems, and overlaying that so we can see what types of calls we're responding to. How are we responding to them? And then how do a lot of those solutions and suggestions that come from the public and the input overlay with that to come to change? And I know we'll have more questions that'll talk about some of those possibilities. So that's kind of the overall part of the working group. There definitely is a timeline, and we're still in the gathering and analytical phase of things, followed by the assessment of the data, understanding it, and then preparing a report based on a lot of the input analysis that we've had. One thing I just want to add, the governor's mandate is an important part of it, and it sets a time frame. The governor's executive order 203 says we have to have a reimagining law enforcement plan by April 1st. I think there's an important point to this. That is one, I would say, small component, I think, of the journey we want to take. It's one step on the longer stairwell. There's much more work to be done. It'll create a foundation, but this is a foundation to step off on for moving forward. So that's kind of a little bit of an overview of the working groups and where we are in the process.
Perfect. So I am going to tag in Mayor Myrick, but I want to let you know that you're not off the hook, Sheriff and Chief. I have another question for you. So Mayor Myrick, do you want to add anything different or chime in?
Well, I'll co-sign what the administrator said and just say that, yeah, it's a tough thing to design, to figure out how to both get people's inputs without burning them out, without asking, especially it kind of goes back to the first question, doesn't it? I can't tell you how many people have told me, look, you keep knocking on my door. I live in Chestnut, or I live in West Village. You keep knocking on my door, you ask for my opinion. You ask me to rehash my trauma, you come back a year later, you ask for my opinion again. How much work do you want me to do? Right? Like, how much work do you want me to do? And the truth is, we should not be, we have folks on staff, we should rely on them to do the work. The community should be able to give their input and then expect results to flow. So the working groups are exactly that. It's like, who can we ask to do many hours of work each week for months? But that doesn't mean that the working groups are the ones who decide what happens. The community decide what happens based on their experience, their desires, their values. And those things are bubbling to the surface. I mean, we're hearing loud and clear what folks want, which is they want an alternative to policing for a great number of our societal problems, from homelessness to mental illness to substance abuse. They want a different force to respond to those issues. And they want police to focus on things that police do particularly well, or could do even better if they had the capacity to do it, which is violence prevention, especially gun violence prevention, preventing property crimes and violent crimes. So those ideas, people are telling us, how many times do we have to tell you that that's what we want before you deliver it to us? Don't ask us to do the work. And I think that's a little bit of that is reflected in the makeup of the working groups, which is the working groups are not here to decide where we go. They're here to curate the ideas from the community and help do the footwork to get us where we're headed.
All right, thank you for that. Now I'm going to put law enforcement on the hot seat. So I would like Chief Nayor to talk about this first, and then Sheriff Osborne, you can chime in. How are the unions that represent the police department and the sheriff's office involved in this process? And I do want to acknowledge time. So just to let you know, we do want to get to community to be able to ask some questions as well. So.
Got it. Thanks, Dominique. Yeah, I'll be brief. So the union, that encompasses everyone within the department, specifically with IPD, everyone from the rank of officer through lieutenant. So all the supervisors and all the officers. So we have 2 focus groups set up. They're going to occur on the 15th. And each one will be able to provide input that's specific to their level of knowledge and understanding and their thoughts that are going to be vital toward this reform movement. And, obviously the officers have one perspective. The sergeants and lieutenants see it from a different perspective, some similarities, but some differences. And I think that's important. As this has been going on, and I've been at all these meetings, I continue to bring things forth, whether it's with meetings I have with the mayor or meetings that I have with this group as a whole. So that way, no one is going to be left in the dark until they have a chance to speak. So I think it's a continual process where people have been kept up to date to the best degree possible, and then they'll have a chance to provide input and have more connection to the whole process on the 15th. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Sheriff Osborne?
Yeah, I'll just simply add at the sheriff's office, there's only 3 of us on the law enforcement side of the operation that are not in a union. That's myself, the undersheriff, and our executive assistant. So really obtaining input from the union body is very important. Of course, they follow my direction and where I direct policy and things of that nature, but it's all done in the guise or in the confines of the union contract. So it's important to have them involved in part of this discussion, and I encourage them to do so and be open and honest, just like the rest of us have done.
All right, thank you so much. So Mayor Myrick, you're back on the hot seat, but I am going to tell you that we do want to get to those community members. So I appreciate your answer being brief. In public statements, it's been reported that you've said that structural issues in the police contract pose barriers to effective police staffing. And so if the contract is central to solving safety problems, what information is available to the public?
About the contract, yeah. So what I meant by those things, so yeah, I said and I meant that look, there are obviously times where we need more staffing than we have. And there are great many times when we need less staffing and more alternatives. Some of those things I was mentioning before, more investment in housing, mental illness, substance abuse. What's the barrier there? Well, the barrier is that in that contract, we're required to provide coverage like 24/7 at base rate. So 24/7, 365, we have the same base number of officers on. We could do more creative staffing solutions and use resources more effectively, right? We know that Fridays are busier than Mondays on average. We know that evenings are busier than mornings on average. And we could and should, I think, deploy resources appropriately. But those things have to be negotiated with the unions. Those contracts are online. We put all, I think, the 5 previous police contracts on the website, including the current one. So you can check that out and not just the city's website, but also the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force website.
All right, thank you. And they're going to be dropped in the chat. So if you want more information, go to the chat. All right, so County Administrator, I'm tagging you into this question. When you say that we need more strategy and deployment, how do you respond to folks suggesting other ways to respond?
So I think what the mayor covered is important about flexibility with resources. And I think that's a big part of this conversation is what other resources do we have and can we use them more effectively? So when I say resources, I talk about things like the community outreach worker program, which has been very successful and it's been expanded. The mobile crisis team out of our mental health department that works sometimes in partnership with law enforcement. Can that be expanded? The community outreach worker program has recently, as a result of COVID, involved multiple agencies that have had a kind of an extended outreach program that has been successful. The city's lead program. So these are all kind of what I would call a strategy in deployment, and being able to invest in those resources that can work collaboratively and kind of a continuum approach can, I think, more effectively respond and at many times may be able to augment, supplement, or many times take on different types of calls that law enforcement have been traditionally responding to. So those are some resources that we have that we can expand upon, and I think those are definitely things that the community's been saying they want us to consider and to look at, and that's what they want in terms of just always having uniform law enforcement officer responding.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Now, the big hot ticket item is about defunding. So will this reform be seriously considering a use of a defund police approach? And so I'm going to tag in the chief and the sheriff to sort of answer this first. And then Mayor Myrick and County Administrator, you can join in as well.
Hey, thanks, Dominique. Yeah, so I think one of the themes that we've all covered here is that there's so many things that police are called to do that are really much better suited to others and should be filtered to others. So I think the real question that we want to ask is, how do we find ways that other services can be funded so that the things that we are now doing can go to the correct entity, and we could spend more time finding ways to engage with the community, finding more ways to do preventative policing, finding more ways to, again, like I said right at the beginning, be that police department that the community wants. Obviously, that requires funding for us to do all those things. But the real question is, how do we fund those other entities that we need? And, some of them we talked about, whether it's outreach workers or improvements within the mental health system, things like that. That's, I think, really where we need to be thinking. And then I think that's what's going to be a huge factor in success.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add to what the chief said. Historically, we all know that law enforcement is always a 24/7 operation. And because of that very nature, I think a lot of stuff has been dumped on us for many, many years and has continued to build over a great period of time. A lot of things that we probably have no business doing, things that we have no interest in doing. So yeah, I think we really have to take a close look at the type of calls we're responding to, and see how we can perhaps direct those other places, provide alternate responses, and get us back to focusing on what we really need to focus on.
Thank you. All right, Mayor, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think they answered it pretty well. I really do need to fund alternatives. It's not just like rely on other alternatives. Say, geez, we should call the police less and ask other people to do more. We really have to pay other people to do more. We need more things like that downtown outreach worker program, the community outreach worker program that's shown great success, the LEAD program that the city put $100,000 into and has just received a $900,000 grant, which we hope to launch next year. Times, 5 or 10. Like we need a lot more alternatives. We have to fund and support those alternatives. And does that mean that the public safety budget won't continue to grow or could even shrink? Sure. But I don't want to give like a political, I don't want anybody to think I'm dancing or obscuring or dancing around this answer, which is, if by defund the police, it's the recent demands, which I hear loud and clear every Sunday, are saying lay off 80% of the officers, reduce the department by 80%. Are we going to do that? We're not going to do that. But could we find alternatives that mean 20, 30, 40% of the call volume are sent to other response agencies, funding of more homeless shelters, transitional housing, supportive housing lead to fewer calls in general? Absolutely. We absolutely should take that approach. So I think it depends, like all things, on what your definition of defund the police is. But I think an approach that says we need to fund alternatives, we need to ask the criminal justice system to handle less. And in so doing, we'll have less discriminatory outcomes and less violent outcomes. Absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to push back a little bit on there. Why are you sort of not going to defund? I think that's a question that people really want to hear your logic behind.
Yeah. Why are we not going to go with 80% fewer officers than we have now? So folks might know that in the city of Ithaca, especially in the daytime, any given day, we'll have 100,000 people in the city. We usually have about 6 officers to cover 100,000 people. Could we do that job with, I don't know, 80% of that is 1 officer for 100,000 people, given current conditions? We just couldn't. We couldn't, especially in a country where you have, again, just to talk real realities, we have as many guns as people in this country. I believe we now have more guns than people in this country. And, the city of Ithaca is, in this, I know is often a surprise to us Ithacans, the city of Ithaca is still part of this country. Like, we do exist in that broader reality. And building the kind of community that does not require such intensive public safety coverage, such intense police coverage, I do believe is possible. I really do. I think if we had better, not just better policies in our police department, but if we had housing first policies, if we had social service supports, if we had higher minimum wages, if we had more affordable rents, if we had better and earlier mental health treatment, I mean, earlier in terms chronologically, just when people are in middle school and high school, getting the care they need. If we had universal and universally affordable healthcare treatment, then you would need fewer police officers. The problem is, how do you slash the police department by 80% and then figure it out from there? Or do you build that better world more gradually, while also gradually reducing your reliance on police to solve all your societal problems? I think if you slash first, solve second, you're going to be in big trouble. And I say this as somebody who I'm aware I've come under the most intense political pressure of my entire career about the fact that our police staffing has only shrunk and not grown. That in the city of Ithaca, where some, I don't know, the chief could probably tell the exact number, but we have fewer officers on the force now than when I started. So when unique amongst American cities as a percentage of our budget, I think it used to be 23% of the city's budget, and it's shrunk now to like 14% of the city's budget, while programs like GAC have increased by 50%, the Youth Bureau by 45%. So, I say this as somebody who's not unsympathetic to the idea that funding social supports can lead to less violence and crime, but I just don't want to be Pollyannish about the idea that we could cut our department by 80% and next year everything would just be okay. We have to build the world we want to live in before we pull out that support net, safety net.
Thank you for sharing that. And Chief County Administrator Molino, I want to sort of expand upon what Mayor Myrick was saying. A lot of people here are sort of concerned because of the way in which Black bodies are sort of being dropped on the streets due to police violence. And we are having a space of collective grief under a pandemic. And Mayor Myrick just sort of said, although walking us through the realities of sort of how to do this work, people don't want to hear that. And so I really want you to give us some context on where you're coming from, because we want to take this seriously and we want to be thoughtful, but people are saying we don't have time for this. So what do you say to those people?
I think I acknowledge first that time and priority is important, and that we want to make this, we want to make these changes as quickly as we can, but as successfully as we can. And I think one thing that the mayor said, that he said a lot of great things, but I think one thing he said that is important to understand is building the structure that is going to support our community is critically important. And there's a human and social support service system that needs to be invested in. And we talk about social determinants of health, things like housing is a critically important component for people to live successfully, have good, successful lives, good health care, good mental health systems. We're a very human service rich environment in this community. And we have I think the wherewithal more so than most communities to make that investment. I understand the urgency, and the only thing I can say is that we agree with the urgency. We also agree with doing it the best way we can and doing it the most effective way we can. I think the worst thing we could do is not make good decisions on the onset without thought, without thoroughness, and potentially put more of our community members at risk. I do believe that investing in a greater a response and greater opportunities, greater services and availability for our residents is going to be an important component of this. Does it mean completely abolishing the need for law enforcement? No, unfortunately, there's probably can always be violent crime to a certain extent, and we want to try to minimize that. But we also are going to need some level of support from our public safety officers to be able to do that. It's a better partnership that we need to look at moving forward, a better culture that we need to work with moving forward. These folks are essential workers, just like our emergency responders, just like our community outreach workers, our crisis team members, and we need to find a better way of utilizing those resources and expanding them to meet the community's needs.
Thank you. So I know that we want to get to sort of questions from the public, and I think this would be a good opportunity to sort of leverage this, because what I'm seeing in the chat is sort of the need for folks to take this seriously on the panel, and that they want to really push you guys to give the answers that they're looking for. And so Mayor Myrick, following the incidents on October 22nd, it appears on videos from social media, let's say, that there was no attempt to de-escalate before arrests were made. And are city resources being spent on these tactics to silence the protesters? What is the process of review for the arrests and incidents of that day? And talk about other scenarios that are similar to this.
Yeah, sure. The few different questions there. So the October 22nd was, of course, Tompkins County Republicans hosted an opening for the new office. There was a protest of the openings, and that led to an arrest, which led to a protest of the arrest, which led to several arrests. So it was hours and hours of situations that require investigation. We asked the Community Police Board to investigate all the actions of all the present officers, including allegations that there was no attempts at de-escalation, that a young Black man was arrested when another person should have been and the young Black man shouldn't have been, and then misgendering of a couple of, well, at least one, but maybe two of the organizers of those protests. So we asked not only a Community Police Board to do that investigation, which is a normal process. My understanding is they've pulled all the footage, they're reviewing all the footage. They're beginning to reach out to witnesses and participants to schedule interviews. We've also asked New York State Attorney General's office and the New York State Division of Human Rights to conduct an investigation. They've called us back to ask a few follow-up questions. We've sent them the footage. I don't know if they're undertaking the investigation. I hope they are, because getting full transparency is really important. All of the thing, why are we investigating it is because our values and our processes are to de-escalate to the degree possible. And especially around gendering people, we have new policies and procedures and trainings. We even have a new officer dedicated to making sure these are followed, make sure that folks are gendered correctly and treated appropriately. So and then last week we announced and released the footage from a sergeant of ours who was talking about, bragging about, joking about violence and evidence tampering. The two things that would most break the trust of the community, like the two things are unacceptable and that we just cannot see or allow in our police department. So, the chief quickly suspended the officer, called me, said we're going to set up an internal investigation. That investigation is also underway. We take those things very seriously. Accountability is really important. What does accountability mean? It means that, when officers are no longer able to complete their tasks with the trust of the community, they are dismissed from service. We've terminated and moved to terminate several officers in the past, and those officers who excel and succeed, we try and reward with more opportunity, more responsibility. That's what accountability means. There's a question in the middle there about us using resources to silence protesters, and I just have to say, it's been 6 months of protests without permits, blocking streets outside the department a couple times, climbing, taping stuff coming outside my home, terrifying the people I live with, and attempting to, I believe, pretty clearly attempting to intimidate me, showcasing my address for everybody in the world. And for 6 months, 7 months now, we haven't dedicated resources to silencing those protests, even if they are saying things we don't agree with or don't think that are true. We've dedicated resources to make sure that they can continue without danger or harm from motorists, from people who mean them ill will. We've spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money protecting those protests and those protesters, and we'll continue to do so because the First Amendment is important, and it doesn't matter, what they're saying. That's just a value in the city of Ithaca, even if I don't like the idea that people are coming to my home. Silencing protests is definitely not something we do in the city of Ithaca.
Got it. So where can people find information about the policing policies and practices? County Administrator, I also want you to weigh in and talk about where folks can find this information and how they continually can get updated on this process. You too, Mayor Myrick.
Mayor, you want to go first? Sure.
Well, the website, so the Reimagine public safety website, I got to say, Dominic Recchio has done a terrific job of put it in. It's very organized. You want to see videos of past forums. You want you want to find a way to contribute, maybe even filling out the online survey, which is a great way to contribute because people can read that in the time they have. If you want to see the policies and procedures that we have on the books, including the PBA contract, right? The contracts are right there so folks can come through them. The website is a great resource. Dominic's also worked to set up these ways for people to contribute outside of, I have a mailbox outside of my office. People can drop their surveys there. The Tompkins County Library set up kiosks in case anybody doesn't have internet access, so people can go into these electronic kiosks and get their input. I'm sure I'm forgetting some stuff, Jason, that you might.
No, you covered a lot of it. There's that way to get information. I think specifically also, Dominic asked about policies and procedures. I know the sheriff has posted a lot of his policies and procedures online for folks to look at, and I believe also comment on. You touched on a lot of the good public touch points as to where people can provide input. We also have the same type of lockbox outside our office and downtown as well. And I know you've been updating the public as you will with the findings from those events that you just talked about as well.
Yeah, we post, the footage when it's available and when it's not either going to compromise an internal or external investigation. I started practice of posting that online. It's why the community knows about this stuff, which would have in the past becomes just part of a hidden history of our government is now out there in the open. And we're going to continue that practice because transparency is also one of our key values.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I want to be able to open this up to public questions from you all. Knowing that I am an outsider from the city of Ithaca and Tompkins County, I want people to be able to ask you those questions that they are really concerned about from a community-centered perspective. So they've been answered, a lot of folks have been getting their questions answered in the Q&A, but there is also some questions that may be in the chat. So I do want to get to a couple of those. Okay, so I'm going to say right now, Zoom chat is sort of the new thing for me. So related to previous questions, Are there any plans to include mental health and addiction crisis services within emergency dispatch, or does that happen now? And can we hear some examples?
I can talk a little bit about it. The question is, are there any plans to include mental health and addiction crisis services with emergency dispatch, or does that happen now? And can we hear examples? So, you know, I will say that, you know, we've talked, you know, we've got the two chief law enforcement officers with us, and we've talked about public safety reform. I should add that there are several other departments that are involved in this process that are probably part of the public safety system, right? The district attorney's office, assigned counsel's office, probation office. One of those departments also is the Department of Emergency Response, which handles our dispatching, which dispatches all the law enforcement agencies in the county. We recognize that there's an important part here when we talk about possibly having other agencies or services respond to calls or instances other than law enforcement, or law enforcement being secondary to them. A lot of that is going to depend on how calls are received, information that's received, and the trained professionals that then dispatch the certain assets and resources. And that is something we're currently looking at. So when I talked about earlier, pulling in data about certain calls and instances and law enforcement data, part of that is looking about how is it received, what information are we gathering, because that's important, the caller providing that information, and then what process do we go through internally, and then what resources do we have available, and how are we routing those calls to those resources. So that is something that I think is going to be key. It's being evaluated now. It's part of this review process, and I think will be instrumental when we talk about tapping into other resources or utilizing or redirecting calls to a more appropriate resource rather than just law enforcement. Good question, critical part of how we get the information that comes from on the ground, the incident, the situation, and getting the right connection of resources to it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I want to be able to get to the folks that have raised their hands and have had their hands probably up in the virtual chat for a long time. So Genevieve Rand, giving you a chance to weigh in.
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to respond to Savante about what you said is different this time, which is that institutions are acknowledging racism and acknowledging police brutality. And I just want to say I have no idea where you got the impression that has not happened before. You can go back and watch the Civil Rights Act get signed in 1964 and hear the President of the United States talk about racism and talk about police brutality. And you can look at the decades that have gone on since then, where police are still being racist, police are still killing people. It's not that we were waiting for institutions to acknowledge these things. It's that we're waiting for something to actually change. You can't say the right words and pat yourself on the back like it's already done. The other thing is that, like, as a trans person, IPD has full-time staff members who are LGBT liaisons, who I don't know how long they've worked there, but the reality is that as soon as officers are put to the test and interact with a trans person on camera, they start misgendering that trans person. And then we come to you and we say, here's what we want done with this. These officers who treated us this way, we want them gone. And you wave us away and you say, oh, the community police board's investigating it. It's been almost 2 months. Not a single one of us has received any communication from the community police board, even asking us what happened that day or asking us what our perspective is. It's just, I've been disappointed with this whole process, but this meeting is a new level of disappointment for me because it's a lot of hand waving, a lot of blaming the community for not trusting the police and saying, oh, well, we'll stop being racist once you start trusting us, and that we can't improve if you don't trust us. It's just, I don't even know what to say, but there's been a lot of lies in this and a lot of just hand waving away the problems that have happened and promising that you're working on it. Meanwhile, the people who are actually affected by those problems, of whom I am one, are getting nothing. And as far as the city spending resources on trying to suppress the protests, like when I was arrested, that's not just the resources that get expended. It's not just the labor of the police officer arresting one person. It's the labor of all the police officers who were there writing reports. It's the labor of an administrator compiling those reports. It's the labor of police officers taking their evidence and putting it in one place when they've been taking photos of us for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It's people preparing documents for court, which when I went to my first court date, they weren't even ready. And they were like, oh yeah, we're still preparing that. Like, there is labor that happens in so many different parts of the city over just one of these arrests. And those, like, when what allegedly the problem was with this was that someone was standing in a place that I wasn't supposed to stand. In a just society, that would be solved by moving a person rather than setting a ton of employees on writing reports about the entire thing the entire time, or God forbid, just driving around me. Like, I'm just so upset. And I've seen, again, a lot of hand waving away, and I don't even want a response here. I just want to let you know that a lot of the people who are watching this call are seeing through what you guys are saying.
So I just want to jump in really quick and thank you so much, Genevieve. And I'm really sorry that you're having these experiences. I do want to call that out and acknowledge that. So thank you so much. I know you said that you do not want a response, and I'm going to respect that given the time, but I would encourage Mayor Myrick to sort of reach out as you have time to be able to address those concerns. So 1 second here. Mayor Myrick, do you actually want to, your face looks like you want to address this. Do you want to address it?
Sure. These investigations do take time, particularly with the community police board. We have 7 people who are chosen from amongst the community to review this footage. The reason we do that is so that the community can trust that it's not just the police policing themselves. It does take time. We have asked them to review the entire day's worth of incident, right? So it is footage from every officer's body camera, as well as all of the cameras inside the departments. So that will also take time. I do respect that process because I've always respected investigations. I actually think it's pretty important for the executive in government to respect independent investigations, or else you have executives saying, investigate this person who's my enemy, investigate that person who's my enemy, stop investigating that person who's my friend. And I don't want to do that. That might look like hand waving or dishonesty. I don't actually even know what's dishonest about that. And it is upsetting to be called dishonest when I have striven my entire public and professional life to be nothing more than upfront and upright, even when it means that people who disagree with me will target me, including protesting outside my house. Yes, that does upset me. It does upset me because the people I live with, my family, I hope to protect. And yes, I do receive death threats on an almost weekly basis, mostly from white supremacists. And yes, not advertising my address is an important way of keeping myself and the people I love safe. Now, have I had anybody arrested or investigated for that? No. Because it is the right, if you believe that that is a useful form of protest, it is your right to do it. If you believe that the department has been discriminatory, I don't know. I just think it's very dangerous what you're asking, to say, we told you, the executive, that something happened that we didn't like, so you should fire them. Don't go through the community police board. Don't do an internal investigation. We want it to happen fast. Imagine that you get the world you live in which any crowd that shows up outside the mayor's house and shouts through a megaphone can get them to do just that. Fire civil servants because of allegations that have not yet been investigated. Imagine living in that world. Right? And imagine a world in which executives base their decisions based off snippets on social media. The arrest in question shows none of the preceding incident, right? Nothing that happened before. Was he arrested because, did he strike the truck of the person who got out of their truck? Did he hit the truck or did he not? I don't know. It doesn't show on social media, and it doesn't show in the petition that was circulated, right? So, I want to take this very seriously, and I know Genevieve has been leading these, and frankly, crowding out the voices of a lot of other Black leaders who have attempted to lead a movement around police reimagining in this community. She's been extremely vocal and persuasive and is won to her sides and followers. So I want to take very seriously if she says that I've been dishonest or she says hand waving. I think that this is what it takes to move real change through a system is real, deliberative, honest, open, and transparent communication. And everything, including those internal investigations, is being done not just by the book, but is even more transparent than the book requires. And I stand by it.
Jump in here.
You can call it dishonest, you can call it hand wavy, but that doesn't make it so.
Well, thank you sort of for sharing that. I do want to be respectful of time, and we have 4 hands raised. Zachary, I saw your hand for a while, so chime in here.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would like to echo some of the sentiments of what Svante just said. I'm sure Genevieve and company will love that. But yeah, the incidents preceding what went on in IPD, Back the Blue, Trump, whoever you want to call them, were assembling on Route 13 to peaceably assemble. They were mobbed. The police showed up, decided to leave. And that is when the actual attack happened, where I personally saw an elderly woman whose shoulder had been dislocated, flags burning in the street, melted there a week later. I'm wondering what you would say to people who don't necessarily feel safe or comfortable coming to Ithaca, traveling through here because of perhaps roadblocks or just a sense of maybe that crime, now that there are, under bail reform and a lack of maybe full staffing has led to people going into perhaps burglarize more houses than they would. So that's my question.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I have a different philosophy. I mean, I think, look, I think that we've seen crime increase this year because the pandemic has increased economic uncertainty and anxiety and fear. And then we've seen crime decrease for the last 10 years because the economy has improved, right? And so to say, well, we have more crime when we have fewer police officers, or we'll have more crime, we'll have less crime if we have more officers. Like, what we see is when people do better, they do better. Right? When they not only have jobs and careers that fulfill, but when they're able to meet their basic needs, and more than just their basic needs, when they're able to get the healthcare treatment, mental health care that they need, when they're able to manage substance dependency, when those things happen, we see crime, violent crime, and property crime go down. So are the politics, and I think that this is where the question is coming from, and I'll admit saying this, knowing a little bit about who asked the question, that it's like, isn't this political movement around defunding the police causing more crime? I happen to not think so. I think the reason we're seeing more crime is because there's more fear, there's more anxiety, it's more desperation. And people who've never been poor might not understand that. It really is hard. It really, really is to think, because usually to be poor seems like wanting something and not getting it. It seems like wanting something and not having it. But really what being poor is to be afraid all the time. And that fear can lead to poor decisions, but also just acts of desperation.
All right, so thank you for sharing that. I do want to be respectful of folks' time. Anyone who did not get there, I realize that it is 5 o'clock. So anyone who did not get their questions answered, please make sure you put them in the chat so that we can address them. I do want to give 1 second each for everyone to wrap up and sort of give some immediate next steps for folks, because people are asking for action and they really want to hear about, someone keeps putting in the chat, what is being done today. And so each of you have 1 second to be able to answer that. And I also want you to be able to take these questions in the chat to more thoroughly answer them. And remember, all of your answers are going to be, all your questions are going to be put into the larger conversation, and you should find those answers on the websites that have been linked in the chat earlier. So I'm going to do that. Mayor Myrick, you got to speak last because you've been speaking a lot and we want to be able to give other folks a chance. So County Administrator, I would like you to go first, and then we can go around to Sheriff Osborne, Chief Naylor, and then Mayor Myrick, you can just chime in.
What is being done right now? I think the question is what can be done today, what is being done now, and how will you know if it's sufficient? Well, I think to go in reverse order, how will we know sufficient? I know this community will talk to us and tell us if they feel it's sufficient. I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. And continuing that feedback from the community is going to be incredibly important. Having conversations, not just in groups, but in one-on-one. And I think we've come to expect that from our community, and we want that. What's being done now and what can be done today? I can tell you there is a lot of effort. There's a lot of conversation. Just as a few hours ago, the sheriff and I and the undersheriff talked about what are some things that we are immediately hearing from the community that we need to put in action. And those are conversations that take place. We want to be able to show action, and we will hopefully be able to do some action before the end of the year, some steps that will begin to show several things. One, a change in the expectation and culture of what your law enforcement officers will be doing, an approach that will become more collaborative with the community. And lastly, how are we going to continue to move that momentum forward in the future? So the only thing I can say is this is on the forefront of the work that we're doing every day, and I hope to have something to show for it in the very near future.
Thank you. So Sheriff Osborne, 1 second. Chief Nayor, 1 second.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what Jason said, just to be quick. I mean, there's a lot more to be done. I went over things we've already responded to over the last 2 years from community input. There's a lot more work to do. And if anybody has questions, please give me a call or email me. I'd be happy to meet with anybody or any group. And perhaps we should consider having another one of these forums at some point if that works out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just say, this has been a time of really a lot of complete introspection, really looking at what we're doing, what we can do better, and really we're having concentrated efforts toward really looking at the things we shouldn't be involved in. One, just for the resource component of it and our abilities and the suitabilities of who is best to handle things, and so that we can free ourselves up with the resources we have to be able to engage in the outreach and to be able to be more preventative and proactive in our efforts. And so we're really taking a very hard look at it. So that is going on as these reforms continue and as we extract all the information from the community, we're looking very closely at what we do now more than ever before. And I think that's going to yield some really good results. So thank you.
Thank you. And before I go to you, Mayor Myrick, I do want to acknowledge that Angela Nash, Kate, Aaron Hill, and James wrote some really good questions, and you all again can find answers to that or reach out to the respective parties. So I do want to acknowledge that you sort of had some responses. Mayor Myrick, 1 minute, 1 second.
Okay, I would do more of this. I would do it again. I think if in a normal circumstance, where we would do this in like the GIAC gym, I probably would have been here all night. This seems like one of those nights we would have gone on. So if we do it again, even next week, I'm game for that. But I also think that we're at a point where we've done a lot of talking and a lot of thinking and a lot of consulting, and the public needs to start seeing some action, especially on the things that are pretty obvious, that are appearing pretty obviously. We want to see non-uniformed, unarmed responses to certain calls, particularly calls around mental illness, substance abuse, homelessness, et cetera. And I think we need to start delivering on that soon, like now. So I think the public can expect more of this process in the coming months, and you can check it out online. But you should also expect to see, particularly in the city, changes in the coming weeks and announcements of changes in the coming weeks to reflect the community vision and voices we've heard so far. So we've done a lot of talking. We need to show that we're also going to be doing.
All right, so I am seeing a few asks for extensions, and I'm happy to extend this if you all have a few more minutes to answer some of these tough questions. If not, we also can extend this into another session next week. And what I'm hearing is that we might need to do both. And I'm happy to do that to be able to make sure that people are getting the answers that they're asking. So I hear a lot of people saying next week. So everybody's saying yes. Sorry, I'm checking the chat. Yes, extend and both of those. Okay. So I'm going to give you all another like 10, 15 minutes to be able to answer this. And then we are going to schedule an additional session for this. And again, if you send your questions ahead of time or even ask them here, we'll make sure that you have the space to get your thoughts out. All right, so I'm going to go to Angela. I've seen you in the Q&A. I've seen you in the chat. You're up. Angela, are you there?
Oh, I didn't unmute, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, as I wrote in chat, there's more than one voice or two voices in the community, and I'm just wondering, as a person that was down in front of the GOP office in mid-October and was a real victim, what is being done to ensure that I have the right to be down there protesting and voicing my opinion and exercising my First Amendment right? What is being done to make sure that I feel protected? Because the real injuries were incurred when the police came and went. And I don't know, I've heard a lot of rumors, the police being told to stand down, they're not allowed to interfere. I'm confused as to whether that also includes when actual crimes are being committed. It doesn't make me want to go into Ithaca or anywhere really, if that's going to be the case.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, go ahead.
Left, right, or center, your right to protest or to assemble is guaranteed, and we do protect it. And the police department does a very professional job of doing that. This rumor has taken off sort of in the right wingosphere that there's a standing order to stand down and let protesters do whatever they want. That is not true. And certainly that day in front of GOP headquarters, that is not true. I did not order anybody to stand down. We do encourage, people to use our officers to use their best judgment, to be tactful. It can be confusing, especially when two groups are mingling. In this case, it was the left and the right, the Republicans and the counter protesters, the left and the right mingling. Who's who, how to separate them. You might remember the officers did get involved at one point, separated folks, and then pulled back and said, okay, folks seem separate. But you should know that everybody does have a right to assemble in the city. It is way better if you get a permit. Permits are easy to apply for. They're online. It helps us figure out things like, should we block roads? Do you need utilities? Do you need power? Do you need water? And especially if two different groups want to use the same space at the same time. Say you want to hold a launch for the Kitten Appreciation Association of Tompkins County at the same time that the Apple Harvest Festival is happening. If you both apply for permits, it helps us schedule 1-2 hours after the other. So we do encourage that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Angela, for your question. So Kate, I have you up next. Kate, are you there? Oh, perfect.
Hi, sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to something Svante said a few minutes ago about, in response to Zach Wynn's comments about how having more police doesn't necessarily reduce crime and having less doesn't necessarily increase crime. And he was saying that, it's programs that often address that. The pandemic has led to more crime because of, businesses shutting down, job losses. So that leads to poverty, housing issues. So I think we could maybe all agree, in essence, what Svante is saying is that it sounds like a lot more funds, especially during times such as these, need to go to housing programs, mental health programs, programs that we might not even have yet that are necessary, especially during a time like the COVID pandemic, and less of that 13 million going to the police. So in essence, it sounded like Svante just said we need to defund the police, but so anyways, that was just my comment. Svante's welcome to respond, but I just thought I would like to highlight that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I hear, Kate, what you're saying, and it sounds like it seems like a one-to-one thing. I mean, first, I just want to say, I think this has been a part of the problem is we need way more money than you could pillage from the police and sheriff's department budget to create a world free of crime. We need way more. And I believe, not to get it too deep into like tax systems, though I will get into a little bit into tax systems. A progressive tax that tax not just income, but also wealth would allow us to build a society with fewer crime by funding these systems at appropriate levels. But even in those societies, you can look at the Netherlands, for example, they still have a baseline of public safety systems. Now, those systems and police departments do look and function differently, but they still exist. Because it's not like if we build bike lanes, we don't need sidewalks. If we build streets, we don't need bridges. You need both. So like purely pulling the money from one to fund the other, actually, I think creates a tension that's not entirely necessary. And again, I say this as somebody who has, over my administration, we've reduced the number of police officers while increasing our social safety spending, and we've seen that crime has gone down, right? So I say that as somebody who agrees with the general ideology, but disagrees when it says, look, here's what you have to do in this budget. Lay off 80% of your officers, spend that money on social support, and you'll be okay. Part because we need way more. And this is why, again, apologies to make it political. And I want to apologize too for Jason and Derek and Dennis for talking so much, but sometimes I talk too much. We need a federal government because the federal government can tax this way, right? All the taxes that we raise are regressive. Sales tax and property tax. Anytime we increase our property tax rate, we are pricing poor people out of the city. Right? The wealthiest can afford it, and it doesn't bother them. In fact, it doesn't bother them. So whenever we are pushing money into social systems, we're walking a very fine line between pushing out of the community the very people we're trying to help. The federal government could, and the state government too, could and should be doing much more. So things like the stimulus helped quite a lot. Those $1,200 checks helped a lot, and the $600 increase also helped. Shoot, I'm getting a call that I'm 15 minutes late for my previous meeting. So I'll stop talking, but I hear what Kate's saying. I think it is a fine distinction, but it's a real one.
All right, so understanding that you have to go and acknowledging that, I want to say in the chat, there are lots of sort of specific examples of folks wanting to really be able to talk with you all about what is happening to them in the community. I acknowledge that, and I would encourage you to sort of make those connections offline. I think that we are going to need to do this again. What I'm hearing a lot is that people are pushing on you all to give them the answers that they're looking for. Kate, I want to thank you for also sort of responding in real time. So I'm happy to sort of host this again and bring you all back. But what I'm hearing from the chat and from the community is sort of that you all really need to be answering the questions about what about now. People are sort of really up in arms about the fact that people are still losing their lives. Black folks are still losing their lives. Brown folks, vulnerable folks, marginalized communities are losing their lives. And that needs to really be explicit in sort of the steps that you're taking to move the work forward. So with that, I do want to turn it over to County Administrator Molino to give some updates on this current process, keeping in mind that we will come back and be really thoughtful and intentional about how we answer these questions going forward.
Sure. I think all of us here, Mayor, the Sheriff, the Chief, and I, we welcome the opportunity to come back and have more dialogue, answer more questions as they come in. One thing I do want to add, Dominique, and one thing I think the Mayor talked about, and it'll build off of what our prior speaker said, Kate, about investing in things now. Recognizing the need that has come from the pandemic, things like housing. Both the city and the county have invested money in rental relief that exists. It's a few $100,000. It's not enough, but it is done something similar for small businesses to be able to maintain themselves. Free testing for our community. This is, both the city and the county purchased testing equipment earlier on, continue to provide free testing for our community members so folks have access. Providing transportation means to get there to minimize any barriers. These are small steps in recognizing certain challenges that have come up in the community, and that it's our responsibility to be there to support the community at a time of need. I think we wholeheartedly agree more investment in these services are important, particularly at a time of need like this. Moving forward the process, Dominique, I think all my colleagues agree we'd be happy to do this again as many times as we need to, and I'll extend the offer, as I know they all have, as the sheriff did. We'd be happy to have one-off conversations with groups or individuals that have been going on, and we'll continue to do that. Our information is easily accessible. We want to make ourselves accessible to the public. So I think a turnaround time, definitely before the next 2 weeks, we can commit to doing another series like this, where we can get into some questions. There's a lot of questions here that I think we can answer in less than a 5-minute response, probably a 30-second response. Good questions too, and we'll promise we'll be less winded and give folks more time to talk.
All right, thank you so much for everybody who has participated. I have noted your names and your questions. I know that next time there will be some sort of heavy law enforcement questions that will be there. So Chief and Sheriff, queuing you up to know that you're going to be talking a lot more. People really want to be able to ask these tough questions, and I encourage them to do so as we move through this process. So everyone, thank you again. Everyone, for your time and for your thoughtfulness and your commitment to reimagining public safety here. Good night.
Thank you.